Sandra Bullock sat alone in her trailer, her hands trembling as she tried to hide her face from the mirror. She had done her best to keep it all inside, the fear, the exhaustion, the crushing pressure that seemed to grow heavier every single day. But now, with the shooting of her new film already weeks behind schedule, the director yelling at everyone, gossip swirling outside about her being too old or too fragile for this role, she could feel the last, a piece of herself slipping away. No one knew that she hadn't slept properly in days. No one knew that each night she stared at the ceiling, wondering if all her years of work would soon mean nothing. Ow. The lights outside her trailer flickered through the thin curtains. Shadows danced on the floor. She wiped her eyes quickly when she heard a soft knock. Sandra forced a smile when her assistant peered in. But it wasn't her assistant who stepped inside. It was keanureeves.com, quiet, standing there in his black jacket, his eyes filled with something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. Keanu didn't say a word. He didn't ask what was wrong or try to tell her to be strong. He just crossed the trailer, sat down beside her, and placed a warm paper cup of tea in her shaking hands. Sandra stared at him, confused at first. Then she felt her throat tighten. As the tears threatened to come back again, the thing about Keanu was that he had always understood silence better than anyone. He knew that sometimes you didn't need a speech or advice or a plan to fix the broken pieces. Sometimes you just needed someone to show up and sit there so you didn't fall apart alone. Outside, the crew were getting restless. The director's voice could be heard barking instructions, asking where Sandra was. But inside the trailer, time felt frozen. Sandra looked down at her tea, her eyes red. She whispered, "How did you know?" Keanu gave the smallest smile and shrugged. "I didn't," he said softly. "I just thought you could use some company." Anadearmas, the young actress who had been working with them on set, stood quietly at the door. She had come looking for Sandra too, wanting to tell her that she looked up to her more than anyone knew. But when she saw Keanu sitting with Sandra, she stayed where she was. Watching a moment that felt too pure to interrupt, Anna remembered her own nights alone in a strange city. When she first moved away from her family to chase her dreams, she remembered the hunger, the doubt, the whispers behind her back saying she would never make it. Seeing Keanu just be there for Sandra made her eyes sting. It reminded her that kindness still had a place in this world, even in the bright, cruel lights of Hollywood. The tea grew cold in Sandra's hands, but her heart slowly warmed. Oh, she knew she would still have to face the director's yelling, the critics, the harsh headlines. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that someone she trusted, someone who had seen her at her best and worst, had shown up without asking for anything in return. Anna finally stepped inside, her voice small but steady. "Sandra, if you need anything, I'm here." "Too," she said. Sandra looked up and saw the sincerity in Anna's eyes. She felt her breath catch. The younger woman reminded her so much of herself years ago. Before the fame, before the fear of falling off the map, Keanu looked at Anna and gave her a nod. It was like he was passing an invisible torch, a message that they were all in this together, no matter how many storms came their way. As the three of them sat together, the tension outside seemed distant. They didn't know yet that tomorrow would bring even bigger challenges. They didn't know that the press would twist this moment into something it wasn't. They didn't know that this bond they were building would be tested in ways none of them could imagine. But for now, in the quiet warmth of a tiny trailer, a silent promise was made that when one of them was about to break down, the others would show up. Without a word, if that's what it took, and remind them they were never alone. The next morning, the set felt different. Sandra stepped out of her trailer, eyes tired but spirit steadier. She spotted Keanu sitting on a folding chair by the catering table, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened the night before. He didn't look for praise or thanks. He just nodded when she caught his eye. And that was enough. Anna stood near the lights, flipping through her script. She felt the weight of yesterday's moment still with her. She couldn't help but wonder how someone like Keanu, who had seen so much pain and loss in his own life, still found the strength to be so gentle with others. The director, however, seemed to have woken up angrier than ever. He stomped across the lot, barking at crew members, complaining about time and money wasted. He shot Sandra a cold look as he passed. She felt her stomach clench, but then she saw Anna give her a small thumbs up from across the set, and it made her breathe a little easier. The scene they were shooting today was complicated. A tense confrontation between Sandra and Anna's characters. The crew was tense too. Rumors were spreading about the studio threatening to cut the budget if things didn't get back on track. Sandra knew the pressure was on her to deliver. When the cameras rolled, she forced herself to slip into the character. The lights were bright. The heat of the spotlights made sweat bead on her forehead. Her voice cracked on the first take. She saw the director throw his hands up in frustration. Anna, sensing the shift, stepped closer. She whispered to Sandra, "Don't listen to him. Just look at me. We got this." It was like a spark. The younger actress, grounding the veteran in the moment. They tried again. This time, Sandra's voice was steady, her eyes fierce. The scene unfolded beautifully, a raw argument that pulled the entire crew into its gravity. When the director yelled cut, there was a stunned silence. It was so good, no one could pretend otherwise. Keanu clapped once, slowly, a proud smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sandra felt something inside her lift, like she'd taken back a piece of herself that she thought she'd lost forever, but the day wasn't done throwing surprises at them. As the sun dipped low, word spread that the studio executives were flying in for a sudden visit. They wanted to observe the progress, which everyone knew really meant they wanted to decide who to blame if things kept falling apart. Back in the makeup trailer, Sandra sat quietly, her eyes closed as the artist fixed her hair. Anna sat on the counter, swinging her feet like a nervous kid. She looked at Sandra through the mirror. "You know they're going to come for you first, right?" she said carefully. Sandra opened her eyes. "I know, I just wish. I wish they understood I'm trying my best." Her voice cracked, a hint of the old fear sneaking back in. Anna slid down and stood in front of her. "Then we'll make them see. You're not alone anymore." She squeezed Sandra's hand. The moment felt like family, fragile but strong. Outside, Keanu stood by the trailers, staring at the sky turning purple. He could sense the storm coming. He knew Hollywood too well. People loved to tear down what they once praised. He took a deep breath, his mind drifting back to his own scars, the headlines about his tragedies, the people who had used him, the nights he'd spent sitting alone on a park bench just to escape the noise. But he also knew this. No one could stop him from protecting the people he cared about. If the studio wanted a fight, they would find him standing there first, as darkness fell. The three of them found themselves in the same small trailer again, Sandra, Anna, and Keanu. They didn't have a plan yet, but they had each other. Sometimes, that was the only thing that could turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. Tomorrow would test them in ways they couldn't see yet. Alliances would shift. Secrets would slip out. Press would twist the truth. But for tonight, they sat together. In the flickering glow of the trailer lights, hearts heavy but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next together. The next day arrived like a hammer pounding on a cracked wall. Sandra woke up before dawn, staring at the ceiling of her trailer. The shadows on the walls looked like monsters ready to pounce. She knew the studio people would be on set in just a few hours, their cold eyes searching for weakness, for someone to blame. She dressed slowly, brushing her hair back with shaking hands. When she stepped outside, the morning air felt heavy. The crew were already whispering, their voices sharp like broken glass. Anna stood by the craft table holding 2 cups of tea. When she saw Sandra, she forced a smile and handed one to her. "Today's going to be rough," Anna said softly, "but we'll handle it." Sandra tried to smile back, but her lips barely moved. She felt the weight of the whole film pressing on her shoulders. Every mistake, every rumor, every slip-up, it all seemed to stick to her name. Then she noticed Keanu standing by the camera truck talking to the gaffer. He looked so calm, so unshaken by the storm building around them. Sandra wondered how he did it, how he could carry so much sadness in his life, yet still be the calmest person in the room. When the black cars rolled onto the lot, everyone tensed up. The studio executives stepped out, their suits crisped, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though the sun wasn't fully up yet. They shook hands stiffly with the director. who suddenly turned all smiles and polite nods. Behind the director's back, the crew exchanged looks. They knew these visits rarely meant anything good. The studio people never came to cheer you on. They came to find out who to cut loose to save money. Keanu watched it all from a distance. He didn't like politics, never had. But he knew how. To read people, and what he saw in those suits made his jaw tighten. They were here for Sandra. Would twist her breakdown, her tired eyes. Her mistakes, they would spin it all until she looked like the problem. The day's shoot was tense. Every time the director called for another take, Sandra's lines felt heavier, like her mouth was full of stones. The executives stood by the monitors whispering to each other. Anna tried her best to stay close, giving Sandra tiny nods of encouragement. At one point, Sandra froze, mid-scene, her eyes blurred. She forgot her next line. The director hissed at her, his voice sharp. "Again, Sandra. Come on, get it together." Keanu stepped forward. "Take 5, he said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. The director turned on him, ready to argue. But one look at Keanu's face shut him up. Keanu led Sandra away from the lights, past the curious stares of the crew. He found a quiet corner behind the set. Sandra's breathing was shallow, her hands trembling. She sank onto a wooden crate, burying her face in her hands. "I can't do it," she whispered. "You're going to fire me. You're going to ruin me. I can't." Keanu knelt in front of her, his voice low and steady. "You've survived worse, Sandra. Don't let them take this from you. They only win if you give up." She lifted her head, her eyes red. "Why do you care so much?" Keanu's face softened. He thought of the people he'd lost, the friends who didn't make it through their storms. He thought of the quiet promise he made to himself long ago, that if he could ease someone's burden, he would do it, no matter the cost. "Because I know how it feels," he said, "and I won't let you drown alone." Behind them, Anna watched, her heart aching. She remembered her first days in Hollywood, the producers who mocked her accent, the nights she cried herself to sleep in cheap apartments. Seeing Sandra crumble made her feel that old fear again, that maybe the machine would chew her up too. One day, but then she saw Keanu's hand on Sandra's shoulder. She saw how his quiet strength made Sandra breathe again, and I knew she had to be that for someone else too. When they returned to the set, Sandra's eyes were still puffy, but her spine was straighter. She looked at Anna, who nodded back at her, like a sister. Keanu took his place behind the camera, arms folded, eyes steady. The studio people leaned in, ready to pounce. But when the director called action, Sandra surprised everyone. Her voice was clear, her expression was raw. Every line she spoke felt real, like she was pulling it straight from the deepest place in her soul. The crew held their breath. When the director said, "Cut," even he couldn't hide the awe in his eyes. The executives exchanged looks. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected her to rise up like that, so soon after they'd almost broken her. As the sun set, the suits climbed back into their cars, their whispers softer now. They didn't have an easy scapegoat anymore. Sandra wasn't done yet, and neither were Keanu and Anna in the quiet after. The three of them stood side by side in the empty lot. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. They knew the fight wasn't over. The worst was still to come. But they also knew they had each other, and that was something the suits would never understand. The next few days felt like walking on a wire stretched above a pit of hungry wolves. Every morning, Sandra woke up before the alarm, staring at the cracked ceiling of her trailer, wondering if this would be the day the studio finally decided. To cut her loose, Keanu stayed close, always just out of the spotlight, but never far enough for her to feel alone. When the director barked orders too harshly, Keanu stepped in, calm but firm. When gossip started to bubble up on set, whispers about Sandra being too soft or too broken, Keanu would shut it down with one look that made even the loudest crew members go quiet. Anna became the unexpected glue between them. She was young, full of hope and fight, and she didn't care if people thought she was too bold for standing by Sandra. One night after a long shoot, Anna knocked on Sandra's trailer door with a bag of takeout and 2 cheap paper crowns she'd bought from a dollar store. "What's this?" Sandra asked, eyes tired but curious. "We're queens," Anna grinned. placing one crown on Sandra's head and the other on her own. No one's going to dethrone us tonight. Come on, let's eat. Sandra laughed, a real laugh that shook something loose inside her. For that small moment, they weren't actresses fighting a system that wanted them to fail. They were just two women, sharing noodles and laughter, reminding each other they still deserved to feel normal. But not everyone was happy about their bond. The director, now under pressure from the studio to speed things up, started acting colder. He pulled Anna aside one afternoon, his voice dripping poison. "You're wasting your time with her," he said. "You're young, talented, and you don't need to drag her dead weight around. Think about your future." Anna stared at him, her stomach twisting. For a split second, old doubts crept in. What if he was right? Standing by Sandra ruined her career before it even bloomed. But then she remembered that night in the trailer, the crowns, the laughter that tasted like freedom. "My future is none of your business," Anna said. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't waver. "And Sandra is not dead weight. She's the reason I'm still here." The director's smile dropped, replaced by a sneer. "Then don't come crying to me when she drags you down too." Anna walked away, her chest tight but her spine straight. When she found Keanu sitting on a crate by the edge of the set, watching the crew shuffle lights around, she told him what happened. Keanu didn't say much. He never did. He just listened, then placed a hand on Anna's shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "Hollywood eats its own. Don't let it eat you too." The next day, the real storm hit. A gossip site published a piece claiming Sandra had caused massive delays, that she was difficult, emotional, impossible to work with. It said insiders believed the studio would cut her scenes and replace her with someone younger. Sandra saw the headline on her phone while sitting alone, in makeup. Her hands shook so badly, she dropped the phone on the counter. The makeup artist pretended not to notice, but Sandra could feel the judgment. Keanu found her before she could slip away to cry alone. "Don't read that trash," he said quietly. But it was too late. The words had sunk their claws in. Anna stormed in, phone in hand, eyes blazing. "This is all lies. They can't do this to you. They can't," Sandra whispered. "They always do." Keanu looked at both women. "Then we fight back," he said, his voice steady like stone. "It's not with gossip, not with anger. With truth. It's with work. We show them who you really are." Later that night, as the crew packed up and the lot emptied out, Keanu stayed behind. With Sandra and Anna, they sat on the cold ground outside the trailers, a blanket wrapped around their shoulders. "What if they win?" Sandra asked in a small voice. "Then they win today," Keanu said. "But not forever. They can't destroy what you've built. Can't erase who you are. You're more than their headlines." Anna leaned her head on Sandra's shoulder. "They don't get to decide how this ends. We do." Under the pale moonlight, the three of them sat together, bruised, scared, but unbroken. None of them knew how much uglier the fight would get. But they did know one thing. They wouldn't face it alone. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella. Sandra could feel the looks people gave her on set, half pity, half waiting for her to fall apart again. The gossip site's story had grown, picked up by bigger outlets. Some headlines even called for her to step down from the film. Inside her trailer, Sandra sat by the small table, scrolling through the comments on her phone. Each word felt like a knife. Old fans saying she was washed up, that she didn't have it anymore, that she should just go away quietly. Her chest tightened until she could hardly breathe. She didn't hear Keanu come in. He saw the phone in her hand, her glassy eyes. Without a word, he gently took the phone and placed it face down on the table. "Enough," he said softly. "You're not what they say you are." Sandra shook her head. "But what if they're right? What if I can't carry this film? What if I ruin it for everyone?" Keanu sat across from her, leaning forward. "Known you for years. I've watched you lift people up, even when you were breaking inside. They don't know that version of you, but I do. I'm not letting you give up on her." Before she could reply, Anna rushed in, breathless. "You guys need to see this." She held up her phone, showing them a video. It was grainy, filmed from behind a fence, but the voices were clear. The director and one of the studio people talking in hushed tones. "She's done," the director was saying. We'll leak that she's unstable. Say we had no choice but to replace her. The press will eat it up." Sandra covered her mouth with her hand. The betrayal hit her like a punch in the gut. Times she'd been blaming herself, believing she was the problem, but they were planning this behind her back. Anna's eyes burned with anger. "We can't let them do this. We can't stay quiet." Keanu's mind was already moving. "Won't. But we don't stoop to their level. We show the truth, not the drama." That night, the three of them stayed in Sandra's trailer. Lights off, voices low. Anna suggested they release the video, but Sandra hesitated. "If we do this wrong, they'll spin it and say I'm petty. Or desperate. We have to make people see the real story." Keanu nodded. "Then we tell them everything. Not just the recording. Your story, your struggles. You remind people why they loved you in the first place." Anna grabbed a notebook and started scribbling ideas, an honest interview. Behind-the-scenes clips showing Sandra's kindness to the crew, moments that proved she was nothing like the gossip said. "But will anyone believe us?" Sandra whispered. Her voice was so small, it made Anna's heart ache. Keanu looked at her eyes steady. "Some will, some won't. But the ones who matter, they'll remember the truth." The next day, while the director barked orders, and the studio people strutted around pretending nothing was wrong, and Anna quietly filmed their own story. Anna used her phone to capture raw moments, Sandra laughing with the makeup, team helping a young extra learn her lines, comforting a nervous stunt double before a dangerous scene. Keanu spoke straight to camera, sharing how he'd watched Sandra carry whole productions on her shoulders when no one gave her credit. The final clip they filmed was in the trailer, the three of them sitting side by side, no fancy lighting, no makeup, just truth. Sandra looked straight into the camera, her eyes wet but strong. "They want you to believe I'm broken," she said. "Maybe I am a little, but I'm also human, and I'm not done yet." That night, Anna posted the video on her social media, with one line, "The truth deserves to be seen." She didn't know what would happen next, whether people would care or if the studio would bury them for good. When she closed her phone, she looked at Sandra and Keanu, both sitting quietly. In the dim trailer lights, they were exhausted, but they were together. And somehow, that made her feel braver than she'd ever felt before. Outside, the director was already on a call, yelling into his phone about how he'd handled this mess. He had no idea what was coming, how the truth once set free would change everything in ways none of them could see yet. The video Anna posted didn't go viral overnight. The first few hours were slow, just a few hundred likes. Some supportive comments from true fans who still believed in Sandra. But by the next morning, everything changed. Small blogs picked up the story. People who had worked with Sandra years ago started sharing their own memories, stories of how she'd stayed late to help extras, how she'd brought food for tired crew members, how she'd never acted like a star above anyone. Else then, a well-known journalist reposted the video with one simple line, "Hollywood loves to break people like her. Maybe it's time we stand up for the ones worth keeping." That was all it took. The clip of the director's voice, plotting behind Sandra's back, spread like wildfire. Hashtags calling for the studio to apologize trended within hours. Fans dug up old interviews where Sandra had defended young actors, praised crew members, and talked about kindness in an industry that could be so cruel. On set, the mood flipped. The same crew who once whispered about Sandra now stood taller when she walked by. Some even patted her shoulder in quiet support. The director pretended nothing was wrong, but the studio people were furious. They called emergency meetings in trailers, trying to figure out how to spin the story. Sandra didn't hide anymore. She did her scenes with her head high, her voice clear, her eyes bright with a new fire. She felt the weight lift, not completely, but enough for her to stand tall. Anna stayed by her side like a sister. Whenever Sandra's voice shook, Anna would squeeze her hand. Keanu was always there too, his quiet presence like a shield no one could break through. One afternoon, a young crew member stopped Sandra near the catering table. She looked so nervous holding a tiny piece of paper. "I just wanted to say thank you," the girl whispered. "You made me believe it's okay to speak up." I used to think I had to stay quiet and take it when people treated me badly. But you showed me it's okay to fight back." Sandra felt her throat tighten. She took the girl's hand and pressed the paper back to her. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just promise you'll stand up for yourself, for anyone else who needs it." When the studio finally made a statement, they tried to sound supportive, but everyone could see they were just trying to save face. The director quietly stepped away from the project. A new one was brought in, someone who actually respected the cast and crew. On the last day of filming, Sandra, Keanu, and Anna sat together in their little trailer one more time. The walls were covered in photos, Polaroids of late-night shoots, silly selfies with crew members, quiet moments that had carried them through the worst of it. Anna placed the old dollar store paper crowns on Sandra's head and Keanu's. "We did it," she said, her voice soft but proud. "We didn't let them break us." Sandra laughed, tears sliding down her cheeks but her smile bright. "We didn't let them break us," she repeated. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his voice calm and steady, like always. "The thing about storms," he said, "is they pass. Sometimes they leave you different, but they don't get to wash you away if you hold on to each other." Anna looked at them both. "So what happens now?" Sandra picked up her phone, watching the flood of supportive messages still pouring in. She knew tomorrow would bring new problems, new rumors, new battles. But tonight, she was ready for whatever came next. "Now," she said, smiling at Keanu and Anna, "we keep showing up for each other. We keep reminding people that kindness still matters, that standing by the right people still matters." Keanu raised his teacup, tapping it gently against theirs. "And we never stop telling the truth," he said. Outside, the lot was quiet, the last of the crew packing up lights and cables. The big city lights shimmered in the distance. Inside that tiny trailer, 3 souls who had nearly been broken found something no gossip site could ever twist: real loyalty, real family, real hope that even in the hardest place people could still stand up for each other when it mattered most. And maybe that was enough to change more than just a single film. Maybe it was enough to remind the world that sometimes when you're about to break down, the right people show up without a word, and that can change everything.